Rosalind Kimberly had spent 17 years climbing the corporate ladder in Boston's ruthless tech industry, and by age 41, she had the bank account to prove it, but also the exhaustion, the stress-related health issues, and the profound emptiness that came from realizing that six-figure salaries and executive titles didn't actually fill the void. She'd started as a junior software developer fresh out of MIT, earning $58,000 a year and sharing a cramped apartment with two roommates. Through relentless work, 70-hour weeks, weekend projects, constant skill upgrades, she'd climbed to senior engineering director at a major financial technology firm, earning $340,000 annually, plus substantial bonuses and stock options. By her 40th birthday, Rosalind had accumulated $1.4 million in savings and investments. She owned a sleek downtown condo worth $680,000. She drove a luxury car. She wore designer suits. She attended networking events where people envied her success, and she was profoundly, desperately unhappy. The breaking point came during a product launch meeting when Rosalind realized she'd forgotten what day of the week it was, hadn't seen her friends in 6 months, and couldn't remember the last time she'd felt genuine joy about anything. That evening, sitting alone in her expensive condo eating takeout at her desk while reviewing code, she made a decision that everyone in her professional circle would call insane. She was going to quit, sell everything, and buy a farm. Not a gentleman's farm or a weekend retreat. A real working property where she could learn to live differently, simply, connected to land and animals and seasons instead of product cycles and quarterly earnings. Her family thought she'd lost her mind. "You're throwing away an incredible career," her father protested. Her colleagues were baffled. "You're at the peak of your earning potential." Her financial advisor was horrified. "This is irrational." But Rosalind had spent 17 years being rational, strategic, and ambitious. It had made her wealthy and miserable. Maybe irrational was exactly what she needed. She spent 3 months researching, visiting properties, learning about different types of farming. In October, she found it. An 85-acre property in rural Vermont, 40 minutes from any major town. The farmhouse was old but structurally sound, built in 1887 with beautiful original hardwood floors and a massive stone fireplace. There was a small barn with 3 stalls, an equipment shed, and pastures surrounded by excellent fencing. The previous owner had raised beef cattle for 30 years before retiring to Florida. The asking price was $425,000. Rosalind offered for $10,000 cash, closed in 3 weeks, and by early November was standing in her new kitchen watching the first snow fall over her Vermont mountains, feeling something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Her plan was modest. She'd keep working remotely as a consultant, enough to cover expenses and maintain her savings. She'd restore the farmhouse slowly. She'd start with chickens, maybe some dairy goats, learn gradually, no pressure, no deadlines, just life. That plan lasted exactly 19 days. On her 20th day of ownership, she received a call from Gerald Whitlock, the livestock extension agent for Washington County. "Ms. Kimberly, I apologize for the cold call. Your property was flagged in our agricultural records as having cattle-appropriate facilities, and I'm in a desperate situation. I have a young Angus bull who needs immediate placement. If I can't find somewhere for him by Friday, he's headed to slaughter." Rosalind blinked, phone pressed to her ear, looking out at her peaceful pastures. "Mr. Whitlock, I'm not a cattle farmer. I literally just moved here 3 weeks ago. I don't know anything about bulls." "I understand, but you have secure fencing and available pasture, which makes you one of only 4 properties in this county that meets the requirements. And Ms. Kimberly, this bull, he's been labeled as difficult by 3 different operations. But I've worked with cattle for 30 years, and I don't believe he's aggressive. I believe he's traumatized. There's a difference." Something in Gerald's voice, the genuine concern, the conviction, made Rosalind pause. "Tell me about him." "His name is Baron. He's 20 months old, about 400 pounds, solid black Angus. He was born in a large-scale commercial feedlot operation in upstate New York, one of those intensive systems with hundreds of cattle, minimal individual handling, constant stress. At 6 months, he was weaned abruptly and roughly. He became defensive, which they labeled as bad temperament. Gerald's voice grew more passionate. They sold him at 7 months to a farm that tried to use him as a breeding bull at just 14 months old, far too young. He was confused and stressed, and when he didn't perform, they called him worthless. The third farm kept him isolated in a small pen for 4 months, which made everything worse. Now he carries a reputation that's going to kill him. Rosalind walked to her window. In 17 years of corporate warfare, she'd seen plenty of people labeled as difficult or not a team player simply because they didn't fit into dysfunctional systems. Sometimes the problem wasn't the person, it was the environment. Maybe the same was true for bulls. What would he need? She asked quietly. Space, time, patience. Just let him exist without pressure or expectations. Provide good nutrition, secure shelter, and let him decompress. Ms. Kimberly, I'll help with everything. Feed recommendations, health monitoring, weekly check-ins. You'd literally be saving his life. Rosalind thought about her own escape from a system that had ground her down, about the healing she'd already felt in just 3 weeks of quiet Vermont mornings. Maybe this bull needed the same refuge she'd sought. Bring him, she said. 2 days later, she stood nervously as Gerald backed a livestock trailer up to her barn. When he opened the gate, Baron emerged cautiously, a magnificent black bull with powerful shoulders and wary, hyper-vigilant eyes that never stopped scanning for threats. He moved immediately to the farthest corner of the paddock and stood rigid, every muscle tense. He's never had consistent, gentle handling, Gerald explained. Every human interaction has been stressful or painful. He doesn't trust people because people have never been trustworthy. After Gerald left, Rosalind stood at the fence watching Baron, who remained motionless in his corner. I spent $410,000 on this farm to escape a life that was breaking me, she said softly. I guess we're both refugees here. We'll figure it out together. Baron didn't move, but something in his rigid posture seemed to ease, just slightly, as if recognizing that this strange place, run by a former software engineer who knew nothing about cattle, might finally be different from everywhere else he'd been. Neither knew yet that Baron was about to do something extraordinary that would shock Rosalind and challenge everything the cattle industry believed about difficult animals. The first 2 weeks were harder than Rosalind had anticipated. Baron remained in the far corner of his paddock, moving only to eat from the hay she placed and drink from the heated water trough. He never approached the fence when she came near. His dark eyes tracked her every movement with rigid wariness, his body always positioned for flight. Gerald visited on the 3rd day, evaluating Baron's condition and teaching Rosalind the basics. His physical health is actually decent, no illness, good weight, strong frame. But psychologically, he's completely shut down. That's a defense mechanism. When every environment has been threatening, you stop engaging entirely. How long does it take to heal from that? Rosalind asked, watching Baron stand motionless 30 yards away. Depends on the animal. Some recover quickly with proper care. Others carry trauma for years. The key is consistency. Same routine, same person, no surprises, no pressure. Let him learn that this place is safe. Rosalind established a rigid daily schedule. Every morning at 7 a.m., she walked to Baron's paddock with fresh hay. She never approached him directly, just placed the hay in the same spot, refilled his water, and left. Every evening at 5 p.m., she repeated the process. She spoke softly each time, her voice calm and predictable. Good morning, Baron. Fresh hay today. You're safe here. She never expected response, never waited for interaction, just provided consistency. On day 16, something changed. Rosalind arrived with the morning hay and found Baron standing 20 feet closer to the gate than his usual corner spot. Not approaching exactly, but not hiding either. His ears flicked forward when she spoke. Well, hello, Rosalind said, surprised. That's new. She placed the hay and stepped back as usual, but this time she stayed at the fence for an extra minute, just being present. Baron watched her, his body still tense but his eyes showing something new. Curiosity, maybe, or the very beginning of trust. By week 4, Baron was consistently waiting near the gate when Rosalind arrived. He still wouldn't let her touch him, still maintained careful distance, but he was engaging. His ears tracked her voice. His body posture had softened from rigid fear to cautious alertness. Gerald was impressed during his weekly visit. This is remarkable progress. Most bulls with his history take months to show this much change. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. What Rosalind was doing was simply being consistent, calm, and undemanding, skills she'd ironically learned in therapy during her corporate years when managing anxiety and burnout. The breathing techniques, the mindfulness practices, the ability to be present without expectation, all of it translated surprisingly well to working with a traumatized bull. In week 6, Rosalind took a risk. Instead of just placing hay and leaving, she sat down on an overturned bucket about 15 feet from the hay pile and pulled out a book. She read aloud for 20 minutes, a novel about mountain climbing, completely random, but her voice was soothing and non-threatening. Baron ate while she read, his eyes occasionally flicking to her, but his body remaining calm. When Rosalind stood to leave, Baron didn't bolt. He just watched her go, chewing thoughtfully. She repeated this every evening. Sometimes she read novels. Sometimes she read farming articles from her phone. Sometimes she just talked about her day, processing her own adjustment to farm life while Baron listened or didn't listen, his choice entirely. By January, 3 months after Baron's arrival, Rosalind could stand within 10 feet of him while he ate. He no longer tensed when she moved. His eyes had lost that hyper-vigilant edge. He'd even started making soft lowing sounds when she arrived, not distressed bellowing, but communication. One frigid morning, Rosalind arrived to find Baron standing directly at the gate, something he'd never done. She approached slowly with his hay, and for the first time, he didn't step back. They stood 5 feet apart, regarding each other. "You're feeling safer," Rosalind observed. "That's good. That's really good, Baron." She set down the hay and, moving very slowly, extended her hand, not reaching toward him, just offering. Baron stretched his neck, nostrils flaring as he scented her gloved hand. He didn't touch it, but he didn't flee either. "Progress," Rosalind whispered. That afternoon, Gerald arrived for his weekly check-in and stood amazed watching Baron and Rosalind interact. The bull remained calm while Rosalind moved around the paddock, even following her at a respectful distance as she checked his water trough. "Rosalind, this is extraordinary. This bull was labeled as dangerous and unmanageable by experienced cattle operations. But you've created an environment where he's healing. Do you realize what you've done? I just gave him what I needed when I left Boston, space to decompress without expectations or judgment. Turns out bulls and burned-out software engineers aren't that different." Gerald laughed, but his expression was serious. "You've got a gift for this. And Baron, I think he's about to surprise you even more. Bulls who heal from trauma like this often develop remarkable characteristics: emotional intelligence, protective instincts, unusual problem-solving. He's been through hell, but he's coming out stronger. Watch what happens next." Rosalind didn't fully understand what Gerald meant, but 2 weeks later, on a snowy February morning, Baron would do something that would leave her speechless and change her understanding of what bulls were capable of when finally given the chance to be more than their trauma. By late February, 4 months after Baron's arrival, Gerald arrived for what Rosalind assumed would be another routine monthly check-in. But his expression was different, relieved, almost emotional. "Rosalind, I came to say thank you," Gerald said as they stood by Baron's paddock, "and to take Baron to his permanent placement." Rosalind felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. "Permanent placement? I assumed he was staying here. This was always meant to be temporary, a recovery foster while I searched for the right permanent home. And I found it. There's a small educational farm in New Hampshire that works with rescue animals and teaches sustainable agriculture. They have experience with traumatized livestock, proper facilities, and they specifically requested Baron after hearing about his progress." Gerald looked at Baron, who was grazing peacefully, his coat gleaming with health, his movements calm and confident. "Rosalind, when I brought him here 4 months ago, I honestly wasn't sure he'd survive psychologically. Bulls that shut down the way he did often never recover. But you gave him something nobody else had: patience, consistency, and zero pressure. You saved him, but he's doing well here," Rosalind protested, surprised by how much the thought of Baron leaving affected her. "Why move him now?" because that educational farm can give him purpose. They'll use him in their breeding program. Carefully, appropriately, at the right age. He'll interact with students learning about animal welfare. He'll have a job, a role. And honestly, Rosalind, I think you need to focus on what you actually want to do here, not manage a 400-pound bull you're still afraid of. Rosalind started to protest, then stopped. He was right. Despite Baron's progress, despite their daily interactions, she still felt a flutter of fear every time she entered his paddock. She'd learned to manage it, to work around it, but it never fully disappeared. That underlying fear wasn't fair to either of them. "When?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning. I'll come with the trailer at 8 a.m. That evening, Rosalind spent extra time at Baron's fence. She'd brought him a bucket of grain, a special treat, and watched as he ate peacefully. When he finished, he walked to the fence and lowered his head, allowing her to scratch behind his ears one final time. "You're going somewhere better," she told him, her voice not quite steady. "Somewhere you'll have real purpose. I was just the stopover, the place to heal. But you deserve more than hiding on a small farm with a woman who's still learning." Baron rumbled softly, his dark eyes calm and trusting in a way that would have been impossible 4 months ago. The next morning, Gerald arrived with the trailer. Loading Baron was remarkably easy. The bull walked up the ramp without resistance, trusting the process in a way that spoke volumes about how far he'd come. As the trailer pulled away, Rosalind felt an unexpected lump in her throat. "You did something important here," Gerald called through his truck window. "Don't forget that." After they left, Rosalind stood in her empty barnyard feeling the silence. Then she shook herself mentally. Gerald was right. She needed to focus on what she actually wanted to build here. Over the next month, Rosalind threw herself into developing her real vision for the farm. She ordered 20 heritage breed chickens, Rhode Island Reds and Barred Rocks, and built a proper coop with generous runs. She attended workshops on organic vegetable gardening and prepared 3 large raised beds for spring planting. She started a farm blog documenting her transition from tech executive to small farmer, writing honestly about the challenges, the learning curve, the moments of doubt. Her posts about Baron's recovery period attracted surprising attention, with other small farmers sharing their own stories of rescued animals and second chances. By April, Rosalind's farm was thriving in its own modest way. Her chickens were laying prolifically. She was getting 14 eggs daily. Her vegetable gardens were planted with heirloom tomatoes, lettuce, beans, and squash. She'd established relationships with local restaurants interested in farm-fresh eggs and organic produce. She no longer woke up with the anxiety that had plagued her Boston years. Her stress-related health issues had improved dramatically. She'd lost 15 pounds without trying, gained muscle from physical farm work, and felt more genuinely content than she had in 2 decades. One warm May morning, as Rosalind collected eggs from the coop, she reflected on the past 7 months. She'd come to Vermont seeking refuge from a life that was breaking her, just as Baron had arrived seeking refuge from environments that had traumatized him. They'd both found what they needed. Baron had healed enough to move forward to meaningful purpose. She'd healed enough to build something authentic and sustainable. Sometimes rescue isn't about keeping what you save, it's about preparing them for what comes next. Baron had taught her that. He'd also taught her that she was stronger and more capable than she'd believed, that patience and consistency could heal even deep wounds, and that sometimes the most unlikely situations, a software engineer fostering a traumatized bull, could create genuine transformation. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Gerald with photos attached. She opened them and felt warmth spread through her chest. Baron, magnificent and calm, standing in a large green pasture with several cows. Baron interacting gently with a group of students gathered at his fence. Baron looking healthy, confident, and purposeful. The caption read, "Thriving in his new role. Thank you for giving him the foundation to get here." Rosalind smiled, saved the photos, and walked back to her garden. She had tomatoes to stake and a life to build, one authentic day at a time. 8 months passed. Rosalind's small Vermont farm flourished through summer and into the following winter. Her chicken operation had expanded to 35 birds, producing enough eggs to supply 2 local restaurants and a small co-op. Her vegetable gardens had yielded abundantly, and she'd learned to preserve her harvest, canning tomatoes, freezing beans, making pickles that sold at the local farmers market. She'd also begun offering weekend workshops on sustainable small farming, drawing people from Boston and New York who were curious about alternative lifestyles. Her blog following had grown to over 12,000 subscribers. The tech salary was now just supplemental income. Her farm was becoming genuinely self-sustaining. In late November, as the first serious snow approached, Rosalind received an unexpected call. "Ms. Kimberly, this is Patricia Holbrook from Green Mountain Educational Farm in New Hampshire. Gerald Whitlock gave me your number. I need to talk to you about Baron." Rosalind's heart skipped. "Is he all right? Is something wrong?" "He's physically healthy, but we're facing an unexpected situation. Our farm is closing. The owners are retiring and selling the property. We've been placing our animals with other facilities, but Baron..." Patricia paused. "Baron has been difficult to place. His history makes people nervous, even though he's been exemplary here. We have 3 weeks before we lose the property, and if we can't find appropriate placement, our options become very limited." Rosalind understood the unspoken meaning. Limited options meant auction or slaughter. "What about the families who adopted other animals?" Rosalind asked. "Baron is different. He's a 2,000-pound bull now, fully mature, powerful. Most small farms can't handle that safely, and commercial operations won't take an animal with his documented behavioral history, even though it's outdated. Gerald suggested I call you." Rosalind walked to her window, looking at her snow-covered farm. Baron's old paddock stood empty. She'd been using it for equipment storage. Her operation had grown, but it was chickens and vegetables, not large livestock. "Patricia, I'm not set up for a bull anymore. I've built something different here." "I understand. But I've read your blog, the posts about Baron's recovery. You had something special with him, and Gerald said you have the facilities, even if you're not using them currently. Ms. Kimberly, I'm not asking lightly, but Baron deserves better than being sent to slaughter because people are afraid of what he used to be, not what he is now." After hanging up, Rosalind spent 2 hours wrestling with the decision. She'd moved past her fear of Baron, had built a successful operation without large animals, had created the peaceful life she'd sought. Taking Baron back meant disruption, additional responsibility, potential danger. But it also meant giving refuge to an animal who'd already been abandoned too many times. It meant honoring the bond they'd formed during those crucial healing months. It meant being the person she'd become, someone who chose compassion over convenience. She called Patricia back. "Bring him home." 5 days later, Rosalind stood in her barnyard as a livestock trailer pulled up. When the door opened and Baron walked down the ramp, she barely recognized him. He'd grown significantly, easily 2,000 pounds now, his frame massive and powerful. His black coat gleamed with health, his movements confident and assured. But when Baron's eyes found Rosalind, something remarkable happened. His ears perked forward, and he made a low, rumbling vocalization, the same contentment sound he'd made during their morning routines 18 months ago. He remembered her. Patricia watched in amazement as Baron walked directly to Rosalind, lowered his massive head, and pressed his forehead gently against her shoulder, the greeting gesture they'd developed during his recovery period. "I've never seen him do that with anyone," Patricia said quietly. "At our farm, he was calm and manageable, but he never initiated affection. Ms. Kimberly, I think he's been waiting to come home." After Patricia left, Rosalind stood with Baron in his old paddock, her hand resting on his broad neck. She'd thought their story was finished, that they'd both moved on to separate futures. But sometimes the most important bonds aren't the ones we plan. They're the ones that refuse to let go, even when logic says they should. "Welcome home, Baron," Rosalind whispered. "I guess we're not done yet." Baron's return transformed Rosalind's farm in unexpected ways. Within weeks, she noticed something remarkable. The chickens, which had always been skittish and scattered throughout their large run, began congregating near Baron's paddock. They seemed calmer in his presence, their stress behaviors diminishing noticeably. Rosalind mentioned this during a visit from a local veterinarian, Dr. Simone Kraft, who'd begun providing services for the farm. "It's called the guardian effect," Dr. Sapra, Kraft explained, watching the chickens scratching contentedly near Baron's fence. Chickens are prey animals with high anxiety. Having a large, calm bovine nearby creates a psychological sense of security. If the bull isn't alarmed, the chickens interpret the environment as safe. It's well documented in mixed-species farming systems. The effect extended beyond the chickens. Rosalind found herself calmer too, more grounded in her daily routines. Baron's presence created structure. Morning feeding at 6:30 a.m., evening check at 5 p.m., weekend grooming sessions. The consistency benefited both of them. By spring, Rosalind made a practical decision. She purchased 3 young Dexter cows, a small heritage breed perfect for her scale of operation. Baron could serve as their herd protector while she explored small-scale beef production. The Dexters integrated seamlessly, and Baron's calm temperament helped them adjust to their new environment. Word spread through Vermont's small farming community. Rosalind began receiving calls from other farmers dealing with difficult livestock, animals labeled as problematic, but possibly just traumatized or misunderstood. She started offering consultations, sharing the patient, low-pressure techniques that had worked with Baron. Her farm blog evolved into a resource for sustainable small farming with emphasis on animal welfare and trauma-informed handling. She wrote honestly about her learning curve, her mistakes, and her successes. The readership grew to over 30,000 followers. 1 year after Baron's return, Rosalind stood at his paddock on a clear autumn morning. The farm was thriving, eggs selling steadily, vegetables producing abundantly, the Dexter cattle healthy and content. Her Boston condo had been sold, her tech career fully behind her. She'd found what she'd been searching for: purpose, peace, and meaningful work. Baron walked to the fence, lowered his head for their morning ritual. Rosalind scratched behind his ears, marveling at how far they'd both come. "You know what I learned from you?" she said softly. "That healing isn't linear, that patience matters more than expertise, and that sometimes the most unlikely refuge becomes home." Baron rumbled his contentment, and Rosalind smiled. She'd left Boston seeking escape. She'd found Baron seeking redemption. Together, they'd built something neither had planned but both needed: a farm where traumatized souls could heal, where patience was valued over productivity, and where the exiled could finally find belonging. The unlikely cattle farm had given the exiled bull refuge. And in return, Baron had shown his owner that the greatest transformations come not from perfection, but from providing space for healing, second chances, and the courage to start again. Some stories don't end, they just find their proper beginning.